So, let me introduce you to Aaron Zeltzer and Jason Friedberg. I don't really know which one is which. But regardless, these are the guys that killed parody. If parody is even killable. It's probably a good thing if you've never heard of them, but to get you up to speed, they are two creatively bankrupt screenwriters who, after several jaded years of writing unproduced scripts, decided to direct and produce their own films by stitching together popular iconic moments from movies that released at the time, even if they only saw the trailer. And yeah, sure, it might not be on the same level as The Asylum, where that studio literally capitalizes on popular blockbusters by replicating them with enough changes to avoid copyright dispute, but at one point, these two guys actually had this unfortunately strong trending commercial success in cinema, representing a pop cultural lapse just prior to the rise of shared cinematic universes. They have the infamous track record of creating some of the worst movies ever made, but their path of destruction was all thanks to the Writers Guild of America for slapping their names onto the final writing credits of Scary Movie, a spoof of popular slasher movies that was intended to bank off the recent success of Wes Craven's Scream, and whether you like it or not, it became a very commercially influential film that spawned many terrible parody disasters. So let's talk about it. I like to think at some point in time, many self-respecting horror fans will probably find at least a glimmer of curiosity to see what this film's fuss was all about. Friedberg and Seltzer managed to sell their trash on the premise that they were two of the 6 writers on Scary Movie, except it was universally the work of the Wayans brothers, a family of entertainers who didn't exactly have the greatest track record either, but at least they knew how to construct some resemblance of a joke.
Oh man, am I fucking stoned?
The film was a massive sleeper hit when it released in the summer of the new millennium, and while it garnered a mixed reception, it was loved by many audiences who saw a certain charm within it. I'm not going to sit here and say they're great films, but for as puerile and crass as the first film was, it actually represented quite a lot of popular cinema at the time. It was less to do with lampooning many iconic horror movies, but rather it managed to be in the right place at the right time because it was able to capitalize off the explosive popularity towards these raunchy teen sex comedies that really don't hold up well in the context of the 21st century. The thing was, Scream had opened up a substantial floodgate for horror to rejuvenate itself after most of the later 80s and early to mid-90s were generic sequels, remakes, and rip-offs that oversaturated and devalued the market as a result. Scary Movie practically did exactly what Scream had already done, but for more lowbrow audiences. While Scream was this intelligent and creatively constructed satire of the genre, Scary Movie was more about punching you on the shoulder to remind you just how formulaic and conventional most Hollywood box office bait really was, and how you were effectively contributing to the problem. That's not to discredit Scary Movie, of course. I think it's disingenuous simply describing it as a spoof of popular horror movies. Instead, much of its success is largely due to American Pie because Scary Movie was arguably an indirect early satire of teen comedies popularized by American Pie that barely exist anymore. The point is, Scary Movie had an unspoken prominence during what was considered to be quite a complicated time in mainstream cinema, and looking back on it now, it's not really all that bad. It's worth clarifying this franchise was, by its very definition, a sole product of its time, because very quickly did the sequels start to show their age. The first film, however, still holds up surprisingly well in just how uncanny it is to the media it was lampooning. At times, it's jarringly identical to its cinematic counterpart, and it even successfully took the skeleton of each plot and constructed its own narrative in a way that's generally quite cohesive. I obviously don't give it credit for originality, it's still a literal retelling of Scream and I Know What You Did Last Summer combined, but whereas many parodies get so caught up in arbitrary set pieces that make absolutely no sense because, for whatever reason, some people think that randomness equates to being funny, Scary Movie 1 at least had an organic way of presenting its jokes.
This is good shit.
In fact, the sequel set the precedent for what's fundamentally wrong with parody films. Because the Wayans brothers were unfairly rushed into producing a second film in under a year after the first film's sudden success, it resulted in the Frankenstein equivalent of stitching together roadkill. Despite being a parody of The Haunting and House on Haunted Hill, most of the movie is comprised of disconnected scenes where they try to throw specific characters into references related to their personality traits, which worked very well in the first film, but here the film only starts to work a bit more coherently when it decides to parody fucking Hollow Man of all things. At least Scary Movie 3 realized its limitations and went for scale by incorporating other genres that worked shockingly well.
These men died for their country. Send flowers to their bitches and hoes.
Scary Movie 1 has a genuine self-awareness to it. It's quite an endearing film at times that knows its place and shows some form of respect to its subject matter. At the time, there was a bit more openness to experimentation given the rise of internet media, and while there were plenty of critical and cult successes, there were also many comedies that decided to reject sophistication and structure to no real positive success. They were just trashy memes of their time pointing out self-generated pop culture absurdities that nobody asked for, while Scary Movie treated itself with a bit more appreciated, lighthearted innocence. It doesn't do anything that's exceedingly tasteless, and for what it's worth, it doesn't treat you like an idiot either. That's what makes it most enjoyable. There is something bizarrely sincere and passionate about it. It doesn't try to be shamelessly zany or provocative just to attract a MTV generation of audience. Sure, it has many terrible ideas, such as the Matrix scenes at the end where it was clear they didn't know how to conclude the film, but then they follow it up with an actual twist ending from The Usual Suspects that makes you go, oh well, that actually makes quite a lot of sense, believe it or not. What Scary Movie had was character. It was able to play off unique personalities with jokes that were consistent to their behaviour. For example, you have Buffy as this self-centered egomaniac, and in one scene she's giving a dramatic reading which turns into her screaming at Greg's horrific murder unbeknownst to the audience who think she's just giving a spellbinding performance. And when she leaves to save Greg, she finds out she's won and...
Buffy, what happened? What about Greg? Oh, fuck Greg, I won! Congratulations! Out of my way, loser!
There is a convincing commitment to a joke. Bar a few moments, rarely is anything ever thrown away with vapidity. Like you have Ray with his complex similar to Mac from Always Sunny in Philadelphia, in that he's a closeted homosexual refusing to admit his sexuality despite his very overt implications.
You know what? I think I knew her.
Really?
Yeah. She had a brother named Steve.
Yeah.
Long hair, pretty little mouth, perfect ass.
That was her.
Nah, I was talking about Steve.
Whatever happened to him?
I still think it's wild that my personal favourite character is Shorty because in any other film he would be the obnoxious character, except like I said earlier, there is a charm to his eccentric stoner quirks as he inadvertently becomes friends with the killer.
Yo.
What's up?
But the character the film stands behind is Cindy Campbell, played by Anna Faris, who brings an awkward relatability to the film. Her naivety is quite believable, and she has a vulnerability that makes you root for her. It gives the film a somewhat human quality. It's not just wrapped up in trying to cram as many cheap, lazy references into it as it can. It very much wants to build its own world and have something, I guess, tangible within it. I think as the series goes on, Cindy becomes the defining feature of the franchise along with Brenda, who I feel doesn't really have all that much to do in the first film and becomes a much more dynamic character in the second film, and despite her brief survival in the third film, she definitely stands out even more in that one.
Cindy, this bitch is messing up my floor!
There is this unusual nostalgia to Scary Movie. Sure, it was just making fun at whatever was popular at the time, but today, it's like this time capsule of an era that we now see as schlocky and antiquated. Scary Movie captured the spirit of a time when people didn't take themselves so seriously, or didn't take themselves seriously enough that they somewhat detrimented the value of an entire entertainment industry that's honestly still rooted in our deep cynicism to watch unadulterated idiocy so that we can feel better about our own lives. It's an encapsulation of our immature nature. It unapologetically doesn't care about being a higher form of art strived to by many other filmmakers. It just wants to have a casual, unceremonious laugh. It doesn't look to offend, even if one could easily point out its more questionable jokes, but instead, it merely gives you something to smile about, in a genre that's usually as dark and dreary as this one.
Well, how do you guys say goodbye?
I had to ask.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for watching as always. Believe it or not, this was the top voted video by patrons for February, so if you want to vote on what the next video could be, and you also want to get early access, get your name in the credits, and even access our exclusive Discord chat where you can tell me what you've been watching, what you've been playing, what you've been reading, please do consider heading over to Patreon where for just a few dollars a month you can help me to grow this show into hopefully something more. You can also chat to me over on Twitter and Instagram. And until next time, stay safe and I'll see you all very soon. Bye.